The security guard didn't even look up when Harriet Weston walked through the lobby doors. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the marble floors she'd approved the budget for 7 years ago, not the company logo etched into the glass wall behind the reception desk, the one she'd argued over with the design firm for 3 weeks because the kerning was wrong. None of that. Just the guard, young, maybe 22, scrolling through his phone behind a curved desk, and the way he didn't so much as glance at the woman who'd built everything around him. She stopped at the front desk anyway. "Hi there," she said. "I'm here to see Colin Marsh." The receptionist, a woman with a headset and a polished smile, looked up and tapped something on her keyboard. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't, no." The smile stayed exactly the same. "And your name?" "Harriet Weston." Nothing. Not a flicker of recognition. The receptionist typed again, frowned slightly at the screen, and said, "I'm not seeing you in the system, Ms. Weston. Mr. Marsh is currently in a leadership meeting until 3. If you'd like to leave a message, I can—" "That's fine," Harriet said. "I'll wait." She took a seat near the window. The chair was new, dark gray upholstery, low back, a design she didn't recognize. Someone had redecorated the lobby. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked out through the glass at the parking lot, at the line of oak trees she'd insisted on planting along the entrance road because she'd read somewhere that green space reduced employee stress levels. The trees were taller now, fuller. She hadn't been here in almost 2 years. Behind her, she heard the receptionist murmur something into her headset. A pause, then, "Yes, sir, I'll let her know." Harriet didn't turn around. She'd driven 4 hours that morning. Left her sister's house in Asheville before dawn, stopped once for coffee at a gas station outside Charlotte, and arrived at the headquarters of Meridian Health Solutions, the company she had founded, funded, and led for 11 years, at 12:43 in the afternoon. She was wearing her good blazer, the dark blue one. She'd pressed it herself the night before. She was not going to let her hands shake. The lobby filled and emptied in small waves. People in badges heading to lunch, returning with coffee, holding quiet conversations near the elevator bank. Nobody sat near her. Nobody spoke to her. She was just a woman in a blue blazer sitting by the window, and that was fine, and she kept telling herself it was fine. At 1:15, a man she didn't recognize came down in the elevator and walked toward her with a carefully neutral expression. "Mrs. Weston?" He was holding a tablet against his chest like a shield. "I'm Drew, Mr. Marsh's executive assistant. I understand you're waiting to see him. I am. He's currently unavailable. He asked me to let you know that any matters you'd like to discuss should be directed through the legal team, and that, Drew," she said his name gently, not unkindly. "Please go back upstairs and tell Colin that I'm not leaving." Drew blinked. He was maybe 26, and he had the look of someone who had prepared a speech and was now watching it dissolve. "Ma'am, tell him exactly what I said." He went. She waited. The afternoon light shifted across the marble floor. Somewhere behind the reception desk, a phone rang twice and stopped. A group of young analysts came through the front doors laughing about something, and their laughter bounced off the high ceiling and faded, and then it was quiet again. Harriet thought about the first time she'd stood in this building. There had been no marble then. The floors were raw concrete, and the walls were unfinished drywall, and the whole place smelled like sawdust and paint. And she'd walked through it with the contractor on a Tuesday in March and thought, with a certainty she'd rarely felt about anything, this is going to work. She had been 31 years old. She was 44 now, and she was sitting in a lobby chair that wasn't hers anymore, waiting for a man who didn't want to see her, and she was still certain about things. That hadn't changed. It was almost the only thing that hadn't. At 1:50, the elevator opened again. This time it was a woman, early 30s, sharp suit, a lanyard that said Executive Team, who walked across the lobby with the kind of purposeful stride that meant she'd been sent to deliver an uncomfortable message, and had decided the best strategy was to get it over with quickly. "Mrs. Weston, I'm Prue Callahan, VP of Operations. Colin thought it might be helpful if we had a brief conversation about, are you going to tell me to leave?" Prue stopped. "We're not asking you to leave. We just thought, good." Harriet stood, which made Prue take a small step back. "Then let's go upstairs. The meeting isn't Prue." She said it the same way she'd said Drew's name. Even, clear. "I built this company. I hired the first 30 people in this building. I approved the layout of every floor, including the one Colin is sitting on right now. I would like to go upstairs. You're welcome to come with me." For a moment, something shifted in Prue Callahan's face, something that wasn't quite recognition but was close to it, a small calculation running behind her eyes. Then she said carefully, "I'll need to make a call first." "Of course." While Prue stepped away and spoke quietly into her phone, Harriet straightened her blazer and picked up the bag she'd set beside the chair. Inside it was a manila folder. Inside the folder were documents she'd carried for 4 hours without opening because she didn't need to open them. She knew what they said. She'd written half of them herself. She had not planned this visit. That was the honest truth. She'd been in Asheville helping her sister after the surgery, and then one morning she'd woken up at 5 a.m. and read the news on her phone and seen the headline, Meridian Health Solutions cuts community clinic contracts in rural expansion pivot. And she'd lain there, in her sister's spare room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the woman in Greenville who'd called her office in 2019, crying because the free screening program had caught her breast cancer early enough to treat it. Harriet had that voicemail saved. She'd listened to it maybe 40 times over the years. Not as self-congratulation, as a reminder. This is what it's for. This is why it matters. She'd gotten up, pressed her blazer, and driven to Charlotte. Prue came back with a different expression. "He'll see you," she said. 5 minutes. "That's fine," Harriet said. "Let's go." The conference room on the 14th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. Harriet had chosen the location for exactly that reason. She'd wanted her leadership team to be able to see beyond the building, out into the world where the company's work actually happened. Now she stood at those windows for the 30 seconds she spent alone before the door opened, and she looked out at the skyline, and she thought, 5 minutes. Colin Marsh came in with 2 people she didn't recognize and one she did, James Faulkner, the board chair, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Colin himself did not look uncomfortable. He was 49, silver at the temples, the kind of handsome that came with a good tailor and enough confidence to fill a room. He'd been CFO when she'd brought him in. She'd promoted him to president. When she'd taken her leave of absence to deal with the situation, the thing she still sometimes called the situation, because the real words for it were too large to carry around casually, she'd handed him the keys and trusted him completely. That had been her mistake. Not the trust itself, the not paying attention. "Harriet," he said, warm, practiced. "It's good to see you. Is it?" He smiled like she'd made a joke. "Sit down." She did not sit down. "I read about the clinic contracts. We've been in the process of restructuring our community outreach model. Colin, 42 clinics. You pulled funding from 42 rural health clinics in 7 states. I read the memo. I know what restructuring means." James Faulkner shifted in his chair. The 2 people she didn't recognize, lawyers, she guessed, or communications staff, were very carefully looking at the table. "The company's priorities have evolved," Colin said. "We're moving toward a premium care model that better serves our growth trajectory. Our growth trajectory." She repeated it slowly, the way you repeat something back to someone when you want them to hear how it sounds. "The mission statement of this company, the one on the wall downstairs, the one I wrote in 2013, says that Meridian Health Solutions exists to expand access to quality health care for underserved communities. That is the mission. That is what every investor signed on to. That is what this company is. Mission statements evolve too. Not without a full board vote, they don't." That landed. She saw it in James's face first, a tightening around the eyes, a slight hitch in his breath. Colin's expression didn't change, but something in it went very still. "The board has been kept informed," he started. "The board has been presented with executive summaries prepared by your team," she said. "That's not the same thing, and you know it isn't." She set the folder on the table. Colin looked at it but didn't touch it. "I still hold a 28% stake in this company," she said. "I am still technically the single largest individual shareholder, which means I have standing to call an emergency board review, which I will do if I have to." She paused, "But I'd rather not." The room was very quiet. James Faulkner cleared his throat. "Harriet, James, I need you to be honest with me. Not with the board, not with legal. With me. Was there a full vote on the clinic contract terminations?" A long pause. "There was a vote on the strategic realignment package, which included the clinic contracts as an embedded line item." Another pause. Longer. "Yes, buried on page 47 of a 63-page document." He said nothing. She picked up the folder. "I'm requesting an emergency board meeting. Full disclosure of all contract terminations in the past 18 months, all changes to community programming, and a formal review of the mission alignment process." She looked at Colin. "You can participate or not. That's up to you, Harriet." He said her name the way people say a name when they're trying to regain control of a conversation. "You've been away. You don't have the full picture of what this company has been through over the past 2 years." "I know," she said. "That's on me. I shouldn't have been away this long." He seemed to expect a fight and not know what to do with the absence of one. "I'm not here to take the company back from you, Colin. I'm not here because I think you're a bad person or because I want to punish anyone. I'm here because 42 clinics lost their funding, and there are people who needed those clinics. and I am not going to sit in Asheville and read about it on my phone and do nothing. She picked up her bag. Call your lawyers if you want to. Talk to the board. But I'll be here tomorrow morning for that meeting, and I'd like it if you were there too. She walked to the door, stopped, and turned back. The lobby chairs are nice, she said, but the oak trees need trimming. The third one from the left has a dead branch. You should have someone look at it. She left. The call came at 8 that evening, while she was eating takeout in a hotel room 11 blocks from the Meridian building. It was a number she didn't recognize, and she almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Weston? The voice was male, quiet, and careful in the way that voices get careful when they're managing the distance between what someone wants to say and what they've decided to say instead. Speaking. My name is Seth Alcott. I'm the VP of Community Partnerships at Meridian, or I was until last month. She set down her fork. What happened last month? I was let go. They told me my position was eliminated in the restructuring. A pause. I've been wanting to call someone for a while. I saw on the news this afternoon that you came to the office, I thought. He stopped. I'm sorry. Is this a bad time? No, she said. Tell me everything. Seth Alcott talked for 94 minutes. Harriet sat cross-legged on the hotel bed with a legal pad balanced on her knee and took notes in the cramped, fast handwriting she'd developed in medical school and never lost. He told her about the strategic realignment plan that had been in development for almost a year before it was presented to the board. He told her about the internal memos that framed community health programming as legacy overhead. He told her about the board member who'd raised concerns and been quietly voted off the committee. He told her about 3 other senior staff members who'd left in the past 18 months under similar circumstances. Do you have documentation? She asked. Some, he said. I have emails. Meeting minutes from the ones I was in. I don't have everything. That's okay, she said. Send me what you have. After she hung up, she sat for a while with the legal pad on her lap and looked at her handwriting covering 3 full pages. Then she picked up her phone and called James Faulkner. He answered on the second ring, which meant he'd been waiting. How many board members didn't actually read page 47, she said. A long silence. Then quietly, most of them. Okay, she said. Then here's what's going to happen. The emergency board meeting took place 4 days later. Harriet spent those 4 days in the hotel, working. She ordered room service twice a day and slept in 4-hour stretches and filled 7 legal pads with notes and timelines and questions she needed answered. Seth Alcott came to the hotel on the second day with a box of files, and they sat at the small desk by the window and went through everything methodically, the way she'd learned to approach problems that felt too large to solve, one piece at a time, in order, without panic. She also called people she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. The lead clinician at the Meridian-funded clinic in rural Georgia, who told her they'd gotten the contract termination notice with 30 days' notice. The public health researcher at Duke, who'd been partnering with Meridian on a rural maternal care study. The study was now paused. The former head of community outreach who'd left quietly and was now working for a nonprofit because, as she put it, the company I joined doesn't exist anymore. Harriet listened to all of them. She took notes. She did not tell anyone what she was going to do until she knew exactly what she was going to do. On the morning of the 4th day, she went back to the Meridian building. This time, the receptionist recognized her, not by name, but something in her bearing must have been different from the woman who'd sat by the window, because she straightened up and said, "Can I help you?" in a way that was less dismissal and more genuine question. "I have a meeting on 14, Harriet said. She went up. The boardroom held 11 people. 9 board members, James and Colin, who sat at the head of the table in a suit that probably cost more than Harriet's hotel room, and wore the expression of someone who had decided to treat this as a routine inconvenience. She didn't waste time. She laid out what she knew in 45 minutes, the timeline of decisions, the pattern of information management that had kept full details from board oversight, the human cost of the clinic terminations. She had names, cases, specific numbers from the communities affected. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She presented it the way she'd been taught to present anything in medicine, with clarity, with evidence, and with the understanding that feelings mattered less than facts when you were trying to save something. When she was finished, the room was silent for almost a full minute. Then a board member named Rosalind Chung, who had been on the board since the beginning, said, "Colin, I need to ask you directly. Was the removal of the community programs a decision made with full board authorization?" Colin said, "The board approved the realignment package." "That's not what she asked," said another board member. An older man, Harriet didn't know him well. He was looking at Colin with an expression that had passed through polite and was now somewhere past it. I want a motion for a formal governance review, Rosalind said. 3 hands went up immediately. Then 2 more. Colin looked at Harriet across the table. She met his eyes and held them, and she thought she saw something in his face shift. Not anger, not quite. Something more complicated. The look of someone who has been very competent for a very long time and has started to confuse competence with correctness. I'll support the review, he said. His voice was steady. She gave him credit for that. Thank you, she said. The governance review took 6 weeks. Harriet stayed in Charlotte. She moved from the hotel to a short-term rental and established a rhythm. Early mornings with coffee and legal pads, long days of meetings and calls, evenings walking the neighborhood near the apartment where she let herself not think about any of it for an hour. Seth Alcott became her informal research partner, and then a formal one when the board retained him as an independent consultant for the review period. She also met in week 3 with Colin. Not in the boardroom, not with lawyers. At a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office, at 7 in the morning, just the 2 of them. He arrived before she did, which surprised her. He was at a corner table with 2 coffees waiting, and he looked tired in a way she hadn't seen in the boardroom. The tiredness that people carry around under their professional surfaces, the kind they don't usually let out. I want to say something, he started. Go ahead. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. When you took your leave of absence, he stopped. Started again. I told myself I was steering the company through a difficult period, that the decisions I was making were necessary, that you would have made similar choices if you'd been here dealing with what we were dealing with. A pause. I don't think I actually believed that. She waited. The clinic contracts were profitable overhead to cut, he said. On a spreadsheet, they made complete sense. And I think somewhere along the way, I started optimizing for the spreadsheet without asking myself what the spreadsheet was supposed to be measuring. He looked up. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just trying to tell you what happened. She considered him across the table for a moment. I know you're not a bad person, Colin, she said. I've never thought that. The thing about the spreadsheet, I've seen that happen to good people before. It's one of the most dangerous things in this industry, actually. The point where efficiency becomes the mission instead of the instrument. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. But you have to be able to see it when it's happening. That's the job. I didn't see it. No, she said. You didn't. They sat with that for a while. What are you going to recommend? He asked. To the board, that the clinic contracts be renegotiated. Not restored wholesale. I understand the financial reality is different now, and I'm not interested in solutions that don't survive contact with a real balance sheet. But a responsible wind-down or restructure with 6 months minimum notice to affected communities and a transition plan. She paused, and a mission alignment process. An actual one, not a page 47 line item. Colin nodded slowly. The board will push back on the cost. I know. That's a conversation worth having. She looked at him. You're good at financial architecture. There's a version of a sustainable community program model that actually works economically. I'd like you to help design it. He was quiet for a moment. Then, why would you want that? Because you know this company. Because you're good at what you do when you're asking the right questions. She set down her coffee. I'm not interested in burning everything down, Colin. I never was. I just needed someone to stop optimizing for the wrong thing. He looked out the window at the street for a long moment. Okay, he said. Let me look at the numbers. The board accepted the governance review recommendations in full. The clinic contract process was paused pending renegotiation. A mission alignment framework, drafted collaboratively, which Harriet had insisted on, was formally adopted as part of the company's governance charter. Seth Alcott was offered his position back. He accepted under a new title with expanded scope. Colin remained as president and CEO. He asked Harriet directly whether she was returning to an executive role. She thought about it for longer than she expected to. She thought about the spare room in Asheville, and her sister's voice coming from down the hall, and the specific quality of early morning light through unfamiliar windows. She thought about 7 legal pads full of notes, and what it had felt like to work that way again, urgent and focused and alive to the stakes of something. She thought about the woman in Greenville and the saved voicemail, which she'd listened to again on the 3rd night in the hotel, sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark. No, she said finally. Not executive. I'd like to rejoin the board. Colin looked at her. That's a significant step down from what you built. I know what I built, she said. I also know what it needs right now. It doesn't need me in the building every day. It needs the right oversight structure and the right people asking the right questions. She paused. And someone who will read past page 47. He almost smiled. It was a real one, surprised out of him. Board it is, he said. On the last morning before she drove back to Asheville, Harriet stopped by the lobby. The morning rush was just beginning. People coming through the doors with coffee cups and earbuds, the elevator bank cycling up and down. She stood near the window where she'd sat 2 months ago, waiting unrecognized in her good blue blazer. The guard at the front desk, a different one, not the 22-year-old with the phone, caught her eye and nodded. She nodded back. Outside, the oak trees lined the entrance road, taller and fuller than she remembered them, green against the early morning. The dead branch on the third one had been removed. She noticed it as she walked to her car. Someone had taken care of it. She stood there for a moment with her keys in her hand and her bag over her shoulder, looking at the building she'd built and the trees she'd planted and the small evidence that someone was still paying attention to the things she'd thought were worth caring about. Then she got in the car and drove.